Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to show you how to make this beautiful card using WOW embossing powder. So what I have here is the brand new WOW embossing trio Summer Twilight, and it's got the color Blackberry, Lavender Fields, and Verdant. So I'm going to go ahead and pull these out, and then I've got my little Nancy Bear here because I'm going to be doing some ink smushing. And I've got Catherine Puller ink in the color Serenade, and I'll be using the smooth side of some watercolor paper. So I'm going to do this just like you do any other ink and just smush it down onto the little pad and then water it down, spread it out with my fingers. And I'm trying to keep this mostly to the center. Of course, it's going to smush out because it's really wet, and that's okay because I'll show you what we do. So I'm just going to dip it a few times, and then I'm going to move that aside, and then I'm going to water it down because this is not the star of the show. This is just the background. And then I'll just take my little paper towel here and just dab around the edges. And then I'll give it a dry with my WOW embossing tool. And any spots that are real big and drippy, I'll just wipe off just by dabbing. And by the way, I don't recommend filming on a gray background. My skin looks really weird, and I'm sorry about that. Lesson learned. So I'm going to dab this again in the leftover ink, just in a couple of spots, so I get some more spottiness. Okay, happy with that. And then I'll do the same thing. I'll just take my water and kind of go around the edges because I want this mostly towards the center. And just dab around anything that has too much excess water, and I'll dry it off. So I'm pretty happy with that. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to splat some water on. And I just spray the water into my hand and just kind of, I don't know, that movement, whatever you want to call it. And then I'll take my paper towel and I'll lift. And then I'll give that a dry. You want to dry in between each step. And then I'm going to get a little bit more water here where it's, to me, a little bit dark. And just lift a little bit more of that ink. Catherine Puller ink works really nice for this method. And the Serenade goes beautifully with the embossing trio. So now I'm going to do a little bit of splattering. You just kind of straighten my paper out so I don't get any weird drips. And I've got my little fan brush, and here I've got the Serenade ink again, and I'm just going to put it down here on my little mat, add a little bit of water, and then just get my brush in there and just tap my brush on. Just tap the little bit of ink on there. It's not a lot, it's small little splatters. But it just kind of adds to the depth and dimension of that background. I'm just going to wipe my brush off here and then add a little bit of water to kind of clean it off so I can switch colors. Because I'm going to be going from a purple to a green. Now you do want to make sure this step is dry before you go to the next step. So now I'm going to come in with some eucalyptus, and I'm not going to do a bunch, just a little bit. Just a little bit. And I'll do the same thing. I'll just get it on my brush and just kind of tap it down. I'm trying to keep it mostly around the edges where the white is. And that's it. That's all I need to do with that. And then I want to go ahead and dry this off again so we can move on to the next step. All right, so we're ready to move on to the next step. I'm going to grab my stamping platform. Make sure this is kind of straight, but I do want to make sure it's completely dry, and it is. So I'll grab my stamps and my stamping platform, and I'm going to be using some stamps from Stampin' Up! Today. I saw somebody do a demo with them, and I just fell in love with the lavender. So I'm going to grab the little lavender bud. You can see it's lived a little bit of life here, and that's okay. And I'm going to find my first point. So that's going to be top center. And what I'll be doing here is so that I have a landmark, because you know when you're embossing, and I'll go ahead and just put some anti-static powder on here. You know when you're using embossing ink, you can't really see it. So I'm going to make a little stamp here with just some lost shadow, a really light gray. You don't have to do this step, and your flower will be a little bit darker because, you know, you've got that gray background, but it's not really going to make a difference. So now I'm going to just stamp the embossing powder over it. The embossing ink over it. And again, this is just so that I have a landmark so I can see what I'm doing for my next ones. So I'll lay this one down over here to the left, and I'll be using the same one until I get to the leaves. And what I'm trying to do is make just a little spray of flowers. And you could use all the flowers, you could use any flowers you want, but I felt like this lavender went so well with that Summer Twilight trio. So go ahead and stamp this one down, and then I'll go ahead and do my embossing. So I'm going to be using all three colors today, and they really go nicely together, and that's mainly what I wanted to demonstrate, was how well these colors work together. So I'm going to be using the Lavender Fields first. So the lighter one's towards the back, so this is basically more of the background. And just make sure they're fully covered. Tap off any excess, and I'll go ahead and heat emboss those. Then I'm going to put that back into my stamp platform. I want to make sure it's cooled because I'll be stamping over the top of that kind of. I'll put it back in my stamping platform. And I'm going to place the little bud kind of between. Now you can do as many or as little as you want on this. And I'll go ahead and just use my embossing ink. I don't need to make any more landmarks. I've got my landmarks. And these are going to be our foreground flowers, so they're going to be darker. Do this last one. And now you see how the background doesn't take over the whole picture. It's just a background. Now these you want to shake up because they have some darker, almost like black specks in it. They're big chunks. It's either a black or a really super dark purple. Gorgeous, whatever it is. Okay, there I've got that down, and I'll go ahead and heat emboss those. And of course I want to make sure they're cool again. So now I'm going to get out my stamping platform, and I'm going to start doing my stems and leaves. In the set, there's this stem that's just a smaller one. I don't want the big one because I'm going to be trimming this down. So generally when I cut my watercolor paper, I cut it at 6 by 4.5 because my watercolor paper is 9 by 12. So I'm placing that so the stem goes up into the flowers. And then you'll notice that I stamp twice. I want to make sure that I get full coverage again because it's sometimes really hard to see. And then I'll go ahead and pull this out. And I'm going to be using the Verdant now. And you want to shake that one as well because it's got specks of gold in it. It's really, really pretty. So it's a dark green with specks of gold. Now I didn't use my embossing anti-static powder, so I do have a little excess embossing powder on there, and I'll just brush it off with a little brush. It's not too bad. And I'll just use my brush very carefully when I get close to my actual design. And I just blew that off a little bit too. And then I went ahead and heat embossed that again. And then I'm going to grab just a simple leaf, and I'm going to live on the edge here and stamp by hand. So I've got, again, my embossing ink. And I'm going to place a leaf. I'm just going to do 2 leaves. These are pretty good sized leaves. I'm going to place one right kind of at the top. So when you're composing, but I'm only going to stamp once, so this is where it's living on the edge. When you're composing, you want to think about, you know, your rule of thirds and your other artistic factors to make sure that your design is pleasing to the eye. So I'm just going to pour a little bit more embossing powder on here, and there's a little spot I missed, and that's okay. I'm going to go ahead and heat emboss this, and then I'll show you how I fix that. So I've got this Wow embossing pen, and I'm just going to take and fill in that little spot. This is where these pens are so handy, and it's clear. And then I'm going to just go ahead and pour a little bit more embossing powder over that, heat emboss it, and wow, it's fixed. Don't you love it? All right, so we've done all of our embossing here. And here's how it looks. Now I'm going to take this gold colored watercolor paint, and I'm going to choose this gold. I don't know, they're all gold, and they actually shine more when they're dry. And I'm going to use my fan brush, and I get it pretty wet, and then I add more water because I want it to be able to flick off the brush. But I don't want giant drips. I want just tiny speckles. So that's what I'm getting. I'm just speckling it all over. And I'm doing this to kind of enhance the gold that's in that Verdant so that we've got a nice color combination. Now I'm going to go ahead and heat set that. And you see the shine come out in the gold once you run that heat over it. Get it nice and dry. All right, so our composed picture is done. Now I'm going to trim this down, and I'm going to trim it to 5 by 3 3/4, making sure that my design's pretty much in the center. Now I've got these little die cuts. I think it's a Spellbinder's die, and I cut it out of some purple paper, and I'm going to go ahead and glue these down onto here because I made a video last month how to make geodes, and this is where we're going to use our geode. So I'm going to glue one to one side, and I'll glue the other one to the other side. You could use string if you wanted to. You don't have to have a special die cut or even just strips of paper. But it's handy to have the die cut. That's all I have to say. So go ahead and glue that down. Make sure it's good and stuck down. And then I'll go ahead and flip it over and trim off the excess. Now I'm going to be using this lavender colored card base. And here we go, just trimming off the excess. Now I put a little bit of foam on the back, and this is fun foam. Because I do want it popped up some. But I do want to stamp a sentiment inside. And so I'm going to get my stamping platform again, and I'm just going to place the card opened in the stamping platform. I'm going to place down my little sentiment, and I'm going to stamp that down with some VersaFine Clair. I want to say that's Monarch. I can't remember. Purple. It's purple. So go ahead and move that out of the way, and then I'm going to take a white piece of paper, or just a piece of scrap paper basically, just kind of rub down on that to pull up any excess ink so that I can close the card and put it all together. And I'm just going to use some, this is probably art glitter glue to glue down that fun foam because it only has sticky on one side. Just kind of get that centered down on there. Make sure it sticks down. Now I'll put something heavy on it for a minute just to give it a chance to set. And just kind of clean up a little, put my pins in my glues and such. And here's one of the little geodes that we made. And it's got a dark purple center. I'm afraid it doesn't show up on camera nearly as beautiful as it shows up in person, but it is what it is. And there we go. We've got our little geode on there, and it's kind of takes the place of a wax seal. And then that's it with the Wow Trio. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up and have a great day. Bye-bye.